Good day, everyone. I welcome you all to this special edition of All About Data in celebration of International Women's Day 2022. The format today is slightly different and it's quite exciting as we have a panel discussion. This panel has quite an international and diverse set of industry experts and successful women. And our discussion today will be focused on this year's theme of Break the Bias. As we begin today's conversation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm on. I'm speaking from the land of Bidigal people, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel for today. We've got Chelsea Burns, Career Clarity Coach at Rise to the Occasion, Emmeline Choi, Regional Director, ASEAN, Korea, and Greater China at Zscaler, Anushka, who is an S3 Academy graduate, account manager at NetApp, and Rachel Hedges, marketing leader and consultant at Fluid. So let's start this panel conversation. Very excited to have you all here. Thank you for your time. And I'm already excited about this conversation. So perhaps I can get the panel to introduce themselves. Chelsea, would you say a few words about yourself, please?
Absolutely, Barsha. Hi, everybody. I'm Chelsea Behrens. Like Barsha said, I am the owner of Rise to the Occasion, and I specialize in helping women in tech love their careers as a career clarity coach and speaker. And I'm happy to be here today. Looking forward to our discussion.
Great. Thanks, Chelsea. Emmeline?
Hi. Thank you. So my name is Emmeline. I'm the regional director for Zscaler in enterprise, covering ASEAN, Greater China, and Korea. I'm based in Singapore. Very happy to be involved in this panel. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Emmeline. Rachel?
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Hedges. I am the marketing director at Fluid and work with a number of other tech companies as well. I'm currently in New Zealand and I look after Fluid globally.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. And Anushka?
Hi everyone, my name is Anushka Mangan and I'm based out of India. I'm quite early in my career and I joined NetApp as a part of the sales division. So for me, it's been about 2 years that I have been a part of the tech industry. Currently, I'm working with the public sector, and the fun fact, I'm the only girl in my district team. I'm super excited and honestly privileged in a certain way to be a part of this exciting and such an accomplished and diverse panel. Thank you for having me, Barsha.
Awesome. Thank you, Anushka. And I completely agree. It's such a diverse panel. And, for International Women's Day, we've got quite an international sort of representation, which is awesome because I'm from Sydney as well, right? So we're covering almost the whole globe, I think. There's Europe missing, but that's okay. So let's get into it, everyone. Focusing on this year's theme, let's start our discussion around bias, the theme being break the bias. So my first question to the panel, what biases are you aware of? Anushka, I'll start with you.
Okay. So we all have biases, and that is how we've been socialized in a way. It is one thing to deal with biases that we're aware of, but another thing is to be aware of the biases that we have unconsciously. So, when you come around in an organization, there are certain elements of culture and your social being that you would definitely see as a person who was like early in the career. I definitely faced a little biasness towards, of course, the gender and the age. For people to take me seriously was a little challenge initially, but you may work your way through. So yeah, so that is something I would like to highlight.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Anushka. Chelsea, what biases are you aware of?
Many. Many. Yes, I mean, there are biases that I've experienced myself, that I've witnessed, that I've even been part of. Becoming part, being conscious of bias is a helpful way to break it up and move past it. One story that I think of in particular was when I was a solutions consultant, I was presenting to a client and saying the same exact thing as a male colleague who said the same thing after me, and the client listened to him rather than me. So that to me is a bias, a microaggression that I had in my experience.
Wow, that is very interesting, and also I think something that a lot of us would have experienced either firsthand or a story, even in our network as well. Awesome, Emily.
Yes, I've known also I've known many I know many biases as well. Some happen to myself, some happen to my friends around me and my colleagues. So I think one example I can think of is that in leadership role, uh, recruiting is always one of the role that you need to do. And I some candidates prefer you'll be surprised. Some candidates prefer male bosses versus female bosses. So I guess the reason is probably because of their bad experience with someone before in the previous employment. But I do think that it's not gender related. It's more like the person's style of management.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, awesome. That is really interesting. Gender, and Anushka also mentioned the gender bias as well, but also experience. But you could have had an experience with one female or one person of certain type or certain, and you've got this mental stereotype around that person or against that for a long time, which is really interesting. Rachel, what biases are you aware of?
Yeah, I reiterate the comments of Chelsea, Emmeline, and Anushka that have already been said. One that's come up recently, though, is geographical bias. So, where are you, and can you meet me, and where can I see you? And then time zones. But more to the point, I think, since being invited to be on this panel, I've become much more aware of biases, much more conscious of it in the last week or two, and I'm starting to see them everywhere, and also within myself. So, as an example, we were creating social media posts for hiring for one of the companies I work for this week, and I realized that all of the pictures were of men. It was a tech role, and I went through and thought, oh my gosh. So I went back through and we subbed in a number of women as well, and both genders as well. So just really easy ways that you can jump in and start breaking them once you're aware of them.
Yeah. Oh, that is a really interesting to hear, and I mean, not just interesting, but in a way, there's so many biases that we're conscious of, not conscious of, but even in this panel, there's quite a lot that we can become conscious of and actually take actions. One of the biases that from my own experience and from what I've seen in being a female in tech world, it's, and it might be in other organizations, other fields as well, right? Like there's if you're from a minority, if you're representing a minority resource group, it's almost like the expectation of perfection. You can't, because you're so visible.
Mm.
Can't get away with just being an average person, because if you're an average person, do you really belong? Like, you must have just gotten through a quota system rather than you being there for your capability. And um, it's really interesting, the things that we feel, experience, and also hear about. So that's thank you for sharing all of that, all of the biases that you were aware of, and actually giving us examples of what you see and what you've experienced. And it's really interesting that even in this panel, that some of the topics that we've discussed about, I think we may not even have thought about it or been part of these conversations even until a few years ago. It is quite refreshing to hear that there is acknowledgement of what is happening, looking at things for what they are without judgment. The conversations around diversity and women's participation are transforming, and beyond just acknowledgement, even beyond providing support to various employee resource groups, right? I'd like to explore that a little bit now with this panel and where we're heading, and we're all almost starting to touch on that already. But my next question to the panel is, how do we break these biases? Rachel, can I start with you on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think number one is the education and being aware of what's happening and being aware of our involvement as well, because of course we're involved in biases and we don't want to be necessarily, but understanding that we have been and then working to break them. So for instance, that example I just gave about social media, I then went to my team and I said, hey, did you realize that we did all these things? Like, did you notice that there weren't any women in there? And everyone was like, oh my gosh, no. So it wasn't anything front of mind. It wasn't done on purpose, but by going and having that conversation about it, it's given an element of consciousness for us to keep an eye out. And then we can go back and look at other elements. And as somebody that's in charge of a public profile for a company, I have the opportunity to share that and help break it through social media, websites, who we put forward to speak on different things, etc. So there's my example.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, and you influence that change, right? Which is so great to happen. Anushka, in your experience, how do we break these biases?
Definitely. Barsha, so in a very simple language, in a very simple sentence rather, I would say people need to reflect and make conscious efforts on not letting the unconscious bias influence their decisions. So that is something that we really need to focus on. For example, in a profession which is actually dominated by females or the women in general is education, because people feel that women are more giving, more caring, and that is why most of the women are teachers. But even if there's a subject in school which is barely related to sciences or IT, there you find a male teacher. So that is something, we need to really reflect on. Even in a profession which is dominated by females, we have in the technical aspect, or be it in any other field in which male are dominating, we still see that there is very less representation from the females. So I feel it has to be a conscious effort from all of us to realize and to reflect, what our biases are. So that's from me.
Yeah, perfect reflection. Great. Emmeline.
I guess I actually agree with Rachel and Anusha. Okay. Basically, I think we all need to be conscious of our own biases and not to let it affect your decisions and anything around you and how you look at people. At the same time, if you are facing someone with biases, do not be afraid to engage and educate them. Like just go to them and tell them who you are and tell them how you can help them with this and that, right? So I think letting them see who you are will help a lot.
Yeah, awesome. I'm loving all the responses. It's so different. The actions that we take and how we actually break this. Chelsea, over to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I would say to be patient with oneself because there's area for growth and learning. I think about two interviews that I had last year and this year. And last year I interviewed two mothers. And the first mother, I asked how having kids impacted her career. And then I realized, hey, I wouldn't ask a man that. So when I interviewed a mother going forward, I said, look, I'm not going to ask you that question. I'm going to ask how your kids have motivated you or something different, because I know that motherhood is a part of your story, and yet it doesn't define you as a woman. So it's really giving yourself grace, learning from times you might mess up and going forward in a different way.
Wow, that is amazing. Just looking at even being patient with yourself, but also allowing that time to really look at how are we showing up and how are we contributing to the bias that that other people might experience. That is amazing. So I'll open this question to the panel. You know, so far I've heard, what are we doing as individuals and what we've seen, like from where you are at, how what other actions are you seeing that are being taken to break biases? And feel free to jump in, whoever wants to go.
In IT, I'll start off first. In IT, I always a couple of years ago, technical sales engineer roles are usually deemed perceived as a guy's job, like a male's job, because of the technical knowledge and the skills of moving equipments around. So over the years, it have changed, whereby we have seen more and more females taking up the role as a technical sales engineer role. So if I happen to see one female pre-sales role, I'm really very impressed with this person because first she has to have the technical knowledge. She needs to have the skills, and she has to know how to sell, and she has to prove herself at some way because people perceive this job is for a guy. So if a female take on this job, she has to at some extent prove herself.
Yeah, awesome. Anyone else?
So adding on to what Emmeline said, being from the tech field myself and working in the sales division, what I see, it's a very field intensive job. So, of course, people perceive that, okay, as a female, you might not want to travel so much. But that is really not the case. We are as willing to travel as any other male. So it is very gender neutral. Traveling is very gender neutral. Of course, safety is a concern that is for both the genders. But there are certain steps that our organization is taking. For instance, whenever I am traveling and it is post 7 p.m., our organization actually sends an escort with me to take me to to my home safely. So that is something I feel that is sort of an encouragement, that is sort of an empowerment that the organization is doing from their end for females like me who are actually on the field.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. I
It's
did know
amazing.
that. That's amazing. Yeah. Rachel,
I want
Chelsea.
I want to say here in the States, since I am in the States, you've all seen on the news how there has been more awareness to racial bias. And it has always been there. It's nothing new. It's simply that more people are becoming aware and more organizations and corporations are speaking up and putting effort in that space. And that to me is extremely important in order for us to change that bias that's in place.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think carrying on from that, Chelsea, I'm seeing when it comes to gender bias in Australia and in New Zealand, particularly in male-dominated industries such as tech or construction, we're seeing a lot more industry bodies come about which are for women, and that helps them to unite and to understand that their challenges aren't unique and that it's faced by a number of people or a number of women in industry, and how they can go about changing that. But I think in turn that has also increased awareness of the organizations and businesses involved in those industries, and they've come with their own items which can help change that as well. So even again, as a part of this, I went back and thought, oh, what are we doing to support the women in our industry? And we thought, oh, well, we can help by creating awareness. So we're doing an International Women's Day feature of blogs for a number of my clients, including Fluid, where we're highlighting the women that work with us and what International Women's Day means to them, and breaking the bias and advice for people coming up in industry and in tech. So I feel like that really contributes to a bigger ripple effect. But you're just seeing it across the board, the changes come and come.
Yeah. Wow, that is so amazing. And like from it, like I can't stress this enough. It's so diverse, this panel, and the answers that I'm getting, it's just amazing, right? Well, one of the things that I see is you're probably starting looking at your own organization and trying to do the right thing, but then the ripple effect is increasing, and we as individuals, we are actually we feel supported, and we want to do more. And so with that, I'm gonna change gears a little bit here and put Chelsea on the spot. I know this is what you do, Chelsea. I've already, I think I tried to steal your thunder with trying to get a theme out of the conversation. But would you, from your experience with you dealing with your clients and coaching, and from this conversation, share some of the insights that you're getting from here, and perhaps even let's discuss on a couple of points from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So what I'm picking up on from all of you, and Barsha, you summarized this right before you asked here, but it's when we all feel supported and valued in that we aren't being recognized, we aren't being seen, or there is bias against us, we are more likely to support others. So when we are not supported, when we are not seen, it's not acknowledged that we have bias against us, then that impacts others because we are less likely to see it in others. So that's what I'm picking up from the theme across what everybody else is saying.
Yeah.
So International Women's Day, last year's theme was choose to challenge, and this year's theme is break the bias. And if I look at those, even just the last couple of years, the common theme is not just even empowering ourselves or getting ourselves empowered. It's about taking on a challenge. So where to next? Where are we going next? We know where we are and where to next. So with that in mind, my last question to the panel is, what will you challenge yourself with? What will you be bold about? Rachel, can I start with you?
Absolutely. I will be bold about calling myself out and calling others out when I see bias happening. And I think that having conversations just like these, and as Chelsea has just highlighted, it's that support and that consciousness of us being aware that they're there, and then us having the boldness to have those conversations that will help to drive change.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Emmeline.
I'll be bold about be aware of my own, be aware of these bias thinking thoughts, and of course to go out to educate people about these thoughts as well, so that people are aware, and we will make decisions. We'll make decisions without this bias there.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Emmeline. Anushka, what are you going to be bold about?
There are several things to be bold about, but I would say I would actually and firmly follow the power of the pack. So I believe I would make bold decisions about supporting other female colleagues. I would be bold about being vocal if I see something happening or if there's something that I'm doing. So that is that definitely resonates with what Rachel and Evelyn said. So yeah, power of the pack.
Awesome. Thanks, Anushka. Chelsea.
Yeah, I am being bold this year in having women share their stories with me. What has your story been? Where did your career originate? How did that flow? And then also coming to each conversation in the present moment without any type of past brought into that conversation. Those are two ways that I'm being bold this year.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Chelsea.
Okay.
And I think for me, it would also be about having these conversations, right? Not being afraid to bring up a topic that could be seen as a sticky topic, because if we're talking about Women's Day or women in tech, it's always like, you're talking about it again. Like, maybe it's in my head, but I'm not gonna be scared about having that conversation, and be bold about bringing that up if I see the need or if I feel like it. Not being stopped with it. So thank you so much to this amazing panel, Anushka, Rachel, Chelsea, Emmeline. This has been such an amazing panel conversation, such a candor sort of conversation, and in celebration of International Women's Day. It's been such an honor to host you guys today, and I'm really grateful that you brought in your stories and experience and you shared with us and our audience. So to our audience listening to this today, I would like you to explore and share with us, what are you taking on and what will you be bold about? Thank you.